Good morning. This is Pastor Eric with your Monday morning motivation. I just wanted to take some time to go through the scriptures with you to motivate you and challenge you for this upcoming week as you serve the Lord. When is the last time you studied the book of Judges? There is a lot of information in the book of Judges that is relevant to our modern society today. Have you ever started something well but not finished well? Have you ever seen someone who started well but didn't finish well? Maybe you've seen someone in a journey of faith who started off strong and did well in the beginning but did not finish well. Well, that's what the book of Judges teaches us today, and we have some important information to learn from the book of Judges that will help us in our journey of faith. Not only start off well, but finish well. The children of Israel in the book of Judges, they start off well, but they don't finish well, and they make a major mistake. And that major mistake is actually found in chapter 1, and that major mistake will haunt them for the rest of the book. But as the book of Judges opens up, Joshua has died, and he's passed the baton of leadership to the people. Before Joshua, Moses led the people, and Moses was a great leader. He was a strong leader. He actually invested in two other leaders. As he was leading the people, he made two very important disciples. One was Joshua, the other one was Caleb. And both of those two men whom Moses mentored will play a decisive role in the strong start as well as the poor finish of the children of Israel in the book of Judges. So in Exodus chapter 23, verses 31 through 33, God tells Moses what to deliver to the people, what to tell the people about going in to the promised land. Starting in verse 31, the Bible reads this way: I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. This is a promise that God gives to Moses. Moses delivers to the children of Israel. So the children of Israel know what God's plan is. They know what God's calling is. They know what their task and their purpose is. And so they have no excuses when they go in. Verse 32, you shall make no covenant with them or with their gods. Now listen very carefully to verse 33. They shall not live in your land. That's a command. This is what God tells Moses to tell the people. They know this. They know this very well, because they will make you sin against me. If the children of Israel are not fully obedient, if they don't practice complete obedience and do exactly as the Lord says, then the people in the land, the inhabitants in the land, will cause the children of Israel to sin against God. This was a warning. This was a command, instruction. And so the children of Israel have to make a choice. Are they going to obey God fully, or are they going to practice partial obedience? Because if you allow them to live in the land, they will make the children of Israel sin against God. And how are they going to do that? For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. So if you allow the people to live in the land with their false idols and foreign gods, then they will influence you, and you will begin to serve their idols and not the living God. And so Israel knows this very clearly. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, and then verse 16, listen to this. When the Lord your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and clears away many nations before you, and then he goes through the list of the different nations, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. Verse 2, listen carefully. And when the Lord your God delivers them before you, and you defeat them, then you shall utterly destroy them. Again, that is a command. It is a promise. It's an instruction, but it's also a warning. You shall make no covenant with them and show no favor to them. For whatever reason, do not allow them to live in the land, because with their idols and their foreign gods, they will influence you. They will cause you to serve their idols and their foreign gods and not the living God. So are the children of Israel going to practice full obedience, complete obedience, or are they going to practice partial obedience? Well, so Moses right before he died, he established Joshua as the next leader of the children of Israel. And the book of Joshua teaches us Joshua's ministry and how he led the people. Now, as Joshua comes to the end of his life, he makes a mistake. He doesn't do as Moses did. He did not invest in the next leader. He did not raise up the next leader. Instead, he just passed on the scriptures, the word of God, to the people, and he told the people to lead themselves. And that was a major, major mistake, because there was no leader. And when there's no leader, then one of the key phrases in the book of Judges is that there was no king in Israel, there was no leader in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And because of that, the children of Israel are going to enter into a cycle of sin. Because of the lack of leadership, the people were going to suffer. So let's pick up in Judges chapter 1. Now it came about after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel inquired of God, saying, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? So the people are connected to God. They're following God. They're obedient to the Lord. They look to the Lord for guidance. And the Lord answers. In verse 2, the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. And so Judah, they were zealous and they were fully obedient to the Lord. And they start off very strong in the beginning. They go in and they defeat the people, they defeat the nations, and they drive them out, or they utterly destroy them, just as the Lord said. In verse 8, the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem, captured it, and struck it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire, just like the Lord had told them to do. Verse 9, afterward, the sons of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites, living in the hill country. Verse 10, so Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron, and they struck Sheshai and Ahiman and Talmai. Then, verse 11 says, then from there he went against the inhabitants of Debir. So again, they've started strong. They're obeying God. They're walking in full obedience, complete obedience. They do exactly what he says. They trust him. They go to him. They depend on him. He gives them a plan of action. They carry out that plan of action, and they do exactly what God taught them to do. In verse 12, Caleb, he's still around. So Joshua has died, but Caleb is still alive. And Caleb comes onto the scene, and he is looking for a warrior to help him. He's also looking for a godly man who will be a husband to his daughter. And so Caleb is he's intelligent, he's wise, and so he doesn't just allow any man to marry his daughter. He wants a warrior, he wants a godly man, a man who is completely obedient to the Lord. And so he promises that if there's a man who will attack this area and fight bravely and do as God says, then he will give his daughter as a wife to this man. And so in verse 13, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, he answers the call. He captures it, and he receives Caleb's daughter as his wife. Now this is important for Othniel. It's also important for Caleb, because Caleb becomes a mentor to Othniel, and he mentors Othniel to the point where Othniel, later on we're going to see, is going to be the first judge in Israel. So, Caleb did what Joshua did not do. He raised up a leader for the children of Israel. He invested in a man, he mentored a man who could lead the people. Joshua didn't do that, and as a result, we're going to see that it leads to chaos because there's no leader and everyone ends up doing what's right in his own eyes, and as a result, they don't practice full obedience to the Lord. Verse 17, then Judah went with Simeon, his brother, and they struck the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them. So again, they've started strong, they're walking with the Lord, they're obedient to the Lord, they're dependent on the Lord, but notice something happens along the way. In verse 19, now the Lord was with Judah, and they took possession of the hill country, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had iron chariots. This is their first. This is the first time that they fail. They're not victorious completely. They do win, but they're not able to drive out the inhabitants. And instead of being persistent and insistent, knowing that God told them to drive out the inhabitants, to destroy them utterly, they don't continue. Instead, they take this as a partial defeat and they let it go. They don't fully obey the Lord. They don't do exactly what God tells them to do. And as a result of that, now it's easier for them to disobey God. It's easier for them not to be fully obedient to the Lord. So verse 21, the sons of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So Judah makes the mistake. They're not persistent. They're not insistent. They give up. They don't fully obey the Lord. And as a result, Benjamin sees that. And now when they go in and they are victorious, they don't drive out the people in the land. So now they're practicing partial obedience. They trust the Lord to give them victory, but they don't fully do what God told them to do. And again, this is catching. This partial disobedience spreads very quickly. Verse 27, but Manasseh did not take possession of Beth Shean and its villages, and the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Ibleam and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages. So the Canaanites persisted in living in that land. So now you see that Judah doesn't fully obey the Lord. As a result of that, Benjamin does not fully obey the Lord. Now Manasseh does not fully obey the Lord. Verse 28, it came about when Israel became strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they did not drive them out completely. So partial obedience, and notice what gets their attention. Why they practice partial obedience to the Lord, why they don't fully obey the Lord. Greed, financial gain. They see the Canaanites as an opportunity for forced labor. They can make some money off of them. And instead of obeying the Lord fully, they see financial gain in their future. And they rationalize, why should we drive these people out? Why should we destroy them utterly? Why should we utterly destroy them if we can put them to work and we can make money off of them? So this greed now is causing them to practice this partial obedience. So there's a chain reaction here. There's a progression of sin. They're not fully obeying the Lord. Verse 29, Ephraim did not drive out the inhabitants, did not drive out the Canaanites who were living in Gezer. So the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Again, disobedience. Partial obedience, but not full obedience. And it's actually disobedient to the Lord. So we've got Judah messing up and not carrying out God's plan. Benjamin now messes up. Manasseh messes up. Now they see a chance for financial gain, and they're driven by greed instead of by obedience to the Lord. Verse 30, Zebulun did not drive out. So see, I told you it was catching. It spread. This idea of partial obedience now has spread to 6 of the tribes, of the 12 tribes of Israel. So verse 30, Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants. So the Canaanites lived among them and became subject to forced labor. Zebulun learned from Manasseh. Wait a minute, why drive these people out? Why utterly destroy them when we can put them to work, forced labor, and make money off of them? We can have financial gain off of them. Verse 31, Asher did not drive out the inhabitants. So again, another tribe is following suit, following the previous tribe's example of partial obedience, not complete obedience. And as a result, they're going to pay for this later on in the book of Judges. Verse 32, so the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Verse 33, Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants. So again, this pattern is repeating over and over and over. The inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced labor for them. Again, financial gain, greed leads them to partial obedience, not fully doing what the Lord told them to do. And remember, he warned them, he told them in Exodus 23 and in Deuteronomy 7, if they do not fully obey the Lord, if they do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, then the inhabitants of the land with their false idols and their many false gods, they will impact, they will influence the Israelites. And then the Israelites will begin to worship those false idols, serve those false idols, and partially obey the living God, but not fully obey the living God. Now their hearts will be divided, and it will be a snare to them. It will pull them away from serving the living God, and they will pay the price for that. There are consequences to partial obedience. So what about today? Do we see this today? Do we see this idea of partial obedience? God tells us to do something. He tells us not to do something, and we partially obey Him. We don't fully obey Him. If that is our mindset, and if that happens, then this will lead us down a path of destruction, just like it led the Israelites down the path of destruction. And what are some things that keep us from fully obeying the Lord? Well, just like back then, we have greed today. We're driven by this idea of financial gain. We think we know better than the Lord does, and our flesh is tempted to receive financial gain, and so we give lip service to God. We obey a little bit, but we don't fully obey Him, thinking that we can avoid the consequences, somehow that we can manipulate God. That's what happened to the Israelites, the children of Israel, and they suffered as a result of it. They paid a heavy price for this. They did end up facing the consequences, and we're going to see that. Verse 35, again, yet the Amorites persisted in living in Mount Heres. But when the power of the house of Joseph grew strong, they became forced labor. So this spread as well, this idea of greed, this idea of financial gain, this idea of partial obedience, because they wanted financial gain, and they did get the financial gain for it. In the short term, they benefited from this financially, but they're going to pay a heavy price spiritually, and the nation is going to suffer as a result of this. So you may get away with it for a time, but the bill is coming. The consequences are coming. God warns us. He tells us that there will be consequences, and it may seem like we get away with partial obedience for a time, and we may for a time, but the consequences will hit us, and they will hit us very hard. So this kicks off this idea of everyone doing what's right in his own eyes, and it starts the cycle of sin in Israel, where the children of Israel, they partially obey God, their hearts are divided, then they turn to idols and they openly disobey God. Then God brings in another nation, another people group to oppress the children of Israel, and the children of Israel remain oppressed for a time. Then they come to their senses. They realize that they had been practicing partial obedience, that they had turned away from God, and that they were suffering the consequences. So they cry out to God for help, and God intervenes. He sends a leader. He sends a judge. That judge frees the people, liberates the people. That judge follows the Lord. That judge teaches the people to follow the Lord all the days of his life. But then when the judge dies, that cycle starts all over. The people again, without a leader, have a divided heart. Once they have a divided heart, then they turn away from God. Then God raises up another people group to oppress the children of Israel. The children of Israel are oppressed for a time. During that oppression, they come to their senses, they realize, and it happens all over again. They finally cry out to God. God raises up a leader, a judge. That judge frees them. They come to their senses. They follow the judge who's following the Lord fully. They follow the Lord fully until the judge dies, and then it starts all over again. And we see that today in our society. We see this in our own lives. Maybe you're stuck in the cycle of sin, and you promise that you're never going to do it again, and then you do it. as time goes by, and you feel terrible about doing it, and you reach out to God and you ask for forgiveness, and He forgives you and He sets you free from it, and you promise that you're never going to do it again. Time passes, your heart's not fully dedicated to the Lord, it's divided, then you do it again, and you feel awful, and then whatever that sin is, whatever that cycle is, it gets its grips in you, and you suffer the consequences of it, and then finally you come to your senses, you cry out to God for help, and He sets you free. But are you living in that cycle over and over and over again? Do you know that the Lord does not want you to live in that cycle of sin? He wants to set you free from that cycle of sin. But notice where it starts. Notice where it starts. You're on fire in the beginning. You are sold out to the Lord. You are walking with Him. But as time passes, your heart's divided, and you're not fully obedient to the Lord. And so partial obedience will lead to a bigger divide in your heart. Then you will turn to idols, and then you will begin to worship and serve them. You'll turn away from God. You'll grab a hold of that sin, and then it will grab a hold of you, and you'll suffer the consequences, and then you cry out to God, and that process just repeats. It's on repeat all the days of your life. That's not the way God wants you to live. We have the book of Judges in the Bible to teach us how to break the cycle of sin so that we don't walk in this pattern over and over again. And this will impact your life, this will impact your family, but it will also impact your nation. And here in the 21st century in the United States of America, we see this on full display. We need strong leaders who are dedicated to the Lord fully, who are not practicing partial obedience, but who are practicing full obedience and encouraging others to do the same. That leader has the cycle of sin broken in his life, and now he's teaching those around him how to break the cycle of sin in their lives. And once that cycle is broken, then we walk in full obedience to the Lord. So what is it in your life that's causing your heart to be divided? What is it? Maybe it's greed, like we see with the children of Israel. Maybe you give lip service to God. Maybe outwardly it looks like that you're following the Lord, but you know your heart. You know deep down inside that your heart is divided. Whatever it is that has its hooks in you, you need to cry out to God so that He can free you. He can set you free so that sin no longer has power over you. And when He sets you free, be on fire for Him. Be zealous for Him. Stay dedicated fully to Him. Obey Him completely, not partially. Make sure that your motives are pure. Make sure that you're doing the right things for the right reasons, because you can do the right things for the wrong reasons, and that will be exposed. God will expose all of that. So this is the introduction to the book of Judges. Judges is a fantastic book. It has a lot to teach us in our modern world. It has a lot to teach us about leadership. It has a lot to teach us about our spiritual lives and our walk with the Lord, how we can depend on Him fully. So I want to teach through the book of Judges. In the next lesson, we're going to look at society. What happens to society when people practice partial obedience, and when their hearts are divided, and when they give themselves over to idolatry, and they worship and they serve idols instead of the living God. You'll notice as we go through that the society during the days of Judges is almost a mirror image of our society today. So what we see happening in the book of Judges is still happening today. I want to be free from the cycle of sin, and I know you do as well. And the book of Judges teaches us how that cycle of sin can be broken and how we can keep from entering back into it. But the key here is complete obedience to the Lord, not partial obedience, that our motives are the same as our actions, and that when we do mess up, we need to cry out to the Lord as soon as we can, as fast as possible, so that He can set us free. And then once we're set free, we teach others how to be set free as well. Each judge is going to be an example of what that looks like. And each judge has some positive things to teach us, but it also has each judge has some negative characteristics that we can learn from so that we don't repeat those same mistakes. So I hope this message is encouraging to you today. I hope this will encourage you to read the book of Judges and really study the book of Judges so that you can see how to break the cycle of sin in your life and help others break the cycle of sin so that you don't end up practicing partial obedience and suffering the consequences as a result of that. Have a great rest of your Monday, and I can't wait to see you again on Wednesday.